I'm telling you to get out. In front of me, my husband glares at me with utter contempt. I instinctively touch my stomach gently. I've given birth to 3 daughters with my husband, but what he always wanted was a son. I still remember how, after giving birth to my eldest and second daughters, he said the next time it had to be a boy. When our 3rd daughter was born, he even left the naming entirely to me. I felt like sighing at the thought of divorce. My husband mocks me.
Don't worry about a successor. There's already someone else who will bear me a son.
My name's Anne, a stay-at-home mom. I just turned 40 this year. I currently live with my husband Tom and our 3 daughters. It's been 3 years since I gave birth to our 3rd daughter. I decided to start working this month. It's because we can't afford to let our 2 older daughters continue their extracurricular activities on my husband's salary alone. I decided to work for the sake of our 3 children. Fortunately, I quickly found a job and now contribute to the household expenses. But lately, my husband has been nagging me about taking care of his elderly parents.
I'd appreciate it if you could quit your job to take care of my parents, Anne.
That's impossible right now.
Why? We can live well enough with luxuries on my salary, can't we?
I haven't indulged in luxury even once. I'm working because your income alone isn't enough to afford the girls' extracurricular activities.
They don't need to do any extracurriculars, right? It's fine not to learn anything.
This is how my husband always grumbles at me. So when he starts talking about this, I've learned to brush it off.
Are you listening, Anne?
I get it. I'll try to help out as much as I can. Honestly, I'm not fond of my in-laws. I don't really want to help with their care. But my husband and I live near his parents' home. We decided to start our married life in an apartment near his parents' house as he suggested when we got married. Back then, I didn't know their true nature and casually agreed. I'm sure that'd be convenient for both parties. But I soon came face to face with the reality. It was about 6 months after our wedding. Jane asked me to help tidy up so we could place a large table she bought for gatherings at their house. At my in-laws' house, I'm treated like a maid. Put this here, tidy that up, serve coffee. As a newlywed, I couldn't handle them well and followed their instructions. Because of this, every time I visited, they treated me worse. Every visit, I'm treated like a maid, forced to listen to their endless boasts and struggles from the past. And finally,
hurry up and give birth to a boy to be the successor,
they'd say. My husband, who said he wanted children, would add,
of course, a boy would be better. If it's not a boy, there's no point in having a child.
Even when I was pregnant, all they cared about was the baby's gender. When they found out the first one was a girl, they insulted me, saying,
one girl might be convenient to have around.
How heartless they were to me. When they found out that both the second and third were girls too, my in-laws blatantly lost interest in my daughters. They never paid any attention to them, only saying,
next time give birth to a boy.
Why is the house so untidy? There's no rambunctious boy playing around. Always busy, yet you can't even clean properly. Is it your laziness why you can't have a boy?
All these girls, and they'll just leave home when they get married. Instead of wasting time on them who won't be successors, you should be devoting yourself to us.
These are supposedly their own grandchildren, and how could they say such words? I never wanted to go to their house, yet I had to endure such treatment. I've talked to my husband about keeping distance from his parents many times, but he never understood.
The house being messy is a fact. Girls are supposed to read quietly and play, right? But look how they've scattered things. It's your job to do the housework and childcare.
It's absurd to say housework and childcare are solely a wife's job when both of us work and have to raise children.
If you use work as an excuse, then just quit and become a full-time housewife. If you can't, then my mom's right, isn't she?
Do you really think your salary alone can support me and our 3 daughters? That's why I'm working too. His reasoning gave me a headache. Sure, there was a time when husbands worked outside and wives stayed home to care for children, but those times have changed. It's normal for wives to work now. Refusing to accept this challenge while insisting that housework and childcare are still solely the wife's responsibility is ridiculous. No matter how much I tried to convince him, my husband never changed.
Mom's right. Dad's way is the correct one.
Every time he said that, thoughts of divorce crossed my mind. But my daughters, oblivious to all this, are attached to their father. Only my eldest, a middle schooler, seems to have some reservations about her dad. Being in her teens, she doesn't interact much with him. But watching our youngest daughter innocently laugh and ask for a hug from her dad I couldn't bring myself to divorce. 3 months passed since then. Suddenly, my husband started coming home late more often. I asked him when he returned one evening, "Tom, you've been coming home late recently. Is something happening at work?"
No, just today. A colleague made a mistake, so I had to stay late. Don't worry about it.
Initially, I believed what my husband said, but as his late returns became frequent, I questioned him again. He started saying things like,
I was delayed by client entertainment. Or, the meeting with the client ran long.
While I started to suspect his behavior and actions, I couldn't gather the courage to confront him, not wanting to take their beloved father away from the children. I began to act as if his late returns didn't bother me. 6 months have passed. A colleague at work told me she saw my husband walking in the downtown area with a young woman. I told her that my husband was at work, so it couldn't be true, but she insisted she couldn't have mistaken him. She and I are close. Our children are of similar ages, and we often go camping or have barbecues together on weekends. She always gets along well with my husband whenever they meet, so I knew she couldn't have mistaken him. But even knowing this, I still wanted to believe in my husband.
Shouldn't I approach him next time I see him?
She suggested, making my heart skip a beat. I told her I'd talk to my husband directly, assuring her everything was fine. Hoping her sighting was a mistake, I went straight to a private investigator after work and requested an infidelity investigation. 5 days later, the investigator contacted me.
It was quite straightforward,
he said. Meeting the investigator after work, I was handed substantial evidence. There were several photos of my husband entering a hotel with a woman. The evidence was clear. I decided to confront my husband about his affair as soon as I got home. He had returned before me and was just looking at his cell phone in the living room. Seeing my face, my eldest daughter took her sisters to her room. Though feeling sorry, I couldn't keep silent. Tom, can you explain this? I've been hearing about overtime and client entertainment, but going into a hotel with a business partner, is that part of client entertainment too? My husband began making a phone call, his face cold, without saying anything to me. He remained silent, not speaking to me. So your silence means you admit it's true?
It has nothing to do with you, Anne.
You really think a husband's affair has nothing to do with his wife?
It doesn't concern you.
No matter how many times I asked, my husband repeated that it had nothing to do with me. Then suddenly, the house's intercom rang. Thinking to ignore it during such a time, my husband quickly went to open the front door. In came my in-laws and the woman from the photos given by the detective. What is going on? Did you call them?
I wasn't planning on telling the truth until everyone was here.
Well, they're here now, so explain. What's with this photo? I pushed the photo at my husband again.
This woman here is pregnant with a boy. Our family has a tradition of needing a male heir. I told you before we married that our family needed a son. Yet, Anne, you only gave birth to girls, and 3 of them. So you're no longer needed. Get out.
As my husband finally started talking, he made no sense and handed me divorce papers. Wait, what do you mean she's pregnant? How long have you been cheating? I knew about the boy thing, but we can't control the baby's gender, right? And Tom, you loved our daughters too, didn't you?
Anne, you knew all about Tom's wishes, yet only gave birth to girls. Someone like that should just leave this out quietly.
Sorry, but I'm not talking to you right now, Jane. I'm talking to Tom. Tom, explain this to me. As I pressed my husband, my in-laws butted in.
Enough of that. Tom's finally going to have the son he's always wanted. You're useless, Anne, and you should just leave.
I'm not talking to you, Ben. I'm talking to Tom. Why are you two getting involved? Don't try to change the subject. My husband took a deep breath.
Isn't this enough? There's no need to talk it over. Just leave quietly.
What are you talking about? We have 3 daughters, and you know as well as I do that it's impossible for me to support them on my income alone.
That's none of my concern. You wanted girls, didn't you? Just get out.
Stop joking around. What do you mean, wanted? Tom, you love the girls too. Why are you saying this now? I thought my husband would say something, but it was his mistress who retorted. This is why middle-aged women are so troublesome. Just leave quietly when you're told to. What are you talking about? You're the one who's made our family complicated. Complicated? It's your fault for not being able to have a boy. The mistress smirked at me. I realized I had expected too much from my husband. We have 3 children, and the youngest adores Tom. I wanted to believe that divorce wasn't the only right choice. I hoped that, faced with the evidence, Tom would think of the children. That he would at least be a good father in front of them, even if we couldn't be a happy family. but in reality, he brazenly brought even his mistress. Fine, I'll divorce you. It's hopeless. I had been too naive. I stood up, feeling this deeply, and went to gather my things. The mistress watched with a smug smile, but I didn't care anymore. I snatched the divorce papers from my husband and signed them. I'll take all 3 girls. I'll demand compensation and child support later. I'll leave for now, but I'll come back later for the things I can't take today.
Do whatever you want.
My usually sarcastic in-laws listened with dissatisfied faces, leaving the matter to my husband. My husband knew this and insisted on telling me. Sensing a different atmosphere than usual, I hugged my eldest daughter, who had been watching from her room. Understanding immediately, she began to pack her things. The second and youngest daughters, thinking they were going out, happily prepared their bags, as they always did when leaving the house. Even as we left with just our essential belongings, no one came out of the living room. The second and youngest daughters looked puzzled, but with smiles and waves, they cheerfully left the house. I contacted my parents, having hardly visited since marriage due to the distance. It was an abrupt call, but my mother immediately told me to come back. They'd come to pick us up, so we decided to stay at a hotel for the night. There, without telling my daughters about their father's affair. Dad and I are now on different paths, I explained. The 2 younger ones, big fans of an idol group that had recently split, had heard them saying something similar. So, we can't be together anymore, right? The eldest seemed to understand my words. Back in my parents' home, I was busy with various procedures, transferring names on documents and other administrative tasks. 2 months flew by and I successfully received compensation and child support from my husband and his mistress. I had demanded compensation for the affair from both and child support from my husband. Wanting to avoid seeing their faces, I arranged everything through a lawyer. It was expensive, but worth it for the stress relief. According to the lawyer who had met with my in-laws, they were silently frustrated when discussing compensation and child support. However, the scandal of their son impregnating someone out of wedlock was bad for public image. Desperate to prevent further complications, my husband and in-laws scrambled to gather the money. Apparently, they even covered the mistress's compensation. 3 months passed. While we couldn't live luxuriously, supported by my parents, we began a peaceful life as a family of 6. My daughters and I were gradually getting used to life without their father. Then on a day off, my husband suddenly called. Ignoring him initially, he kept calling repeatedly. Worried that the continuous ringing would bother my daughters at their lessons, I reluctantly answered.
Oh good, Anne. I'm glad you finally picked up.
What do you want all of a sudden?
Actually, the mistress gave birth recently.
And what do you expect me to say to that? About to coldly cut the call, my husband suddenly raised his voice.
It's a girl.
My husband said that his mistress had given birth to a girl, and it wasn't a mistake in the ultrasound. The doctor told him from the start that it was a girl. The mistress lied about the baby's gender to marry him. Apparently, Tom was thinking of divorcing her if the baby was not a boy, but it was her in-laws who stopped her. They didn't want to lose their only grandchild. It seems like she was thinking about having another child right away, but her daily life has gotten so rough that she can't think of anything like that. Since she just gave birth, she had no job and no income. So he called off the divorce. Well, if you're taking care of a baby who's just old enough to hold their head up, life is probably like that. It's hard to do household chores as perfectly as before childbirth when you're desperate about the baby. And there's no way you have the energy or time to care for in-laws. Yet even living with such a new wife, the husband told me he's thinking of divorce now. What are you going to do by telling me that? I said coldly to my husband.
Anne, please, can't we start over?
He asked. What? You think I'm going to get back together with you now? No way. I snapped back at my husband.
Don't say that. You have a thorny yet delicate beauty like a rose. I love that about you, Anne. Let's start over one more time.
My husband was trying to hold me back with poetic words. His words gave me chills.
Anne, are you listening? We've been together for a long time, right? Just because we've been apart for a bit doesn't mean your feelings have changed, right?
Maybe I would have been happy with my husband's words of love when we first married, but after discovering his affair and getting a divorce, such words now only bring cold feelings to me. I laughed bitterly.
You're laughing. Does that mean you forgive me?
My husband misunderstood and said happily. What? Are you that stupid? That was a bitter laugh. I'm not smiling, and I haven't forgiven you.
Why would you say that? Anne, please. Let's think about getting back together. Haven't we been doing well? You were happy, weren't you?
We weren't doing well. That's why we fought so many times. I wasn't happy. That's why I divorced you. After all, you were the one who said you didn't need me.
We could start over, right? I was the one who said we should break up, so I'm the one saying we should get back together. Let's do it.
My husband started saying absurd things to reconcile with me. I was honestly sick of hearing about the past, but then I suddenly changed the topic. Oh yeah, about Emma.
Why do you know Emma's name? She didn't introduce herself.
My husband raised his voice in surprise when I mentioned the name of his current partner. Of course, I know. I heard from the detective and sent her the compensation documents. So, about her.
What about Emma?
I was just wondering who she's targeting next. She has a hobby of meddling with happy couples or married people and breaking them up. Now that I'm divorced from you, I was thinking who her next target would be. My husband said nothing. Maybe he was speechless, mouth agape. I explained to my husband about this woman, Emma. Emma has been very cute since she was young, always surrounded by various people. Her father was the president of a company, adored her, spoiled her, and bought her anything she wanted. Because she could get anything, stealing from others became her hobby. As she grew up, her targets for stealing became boyfriends, fiancés, husbands. Stealing was her hobby, so once she got them, she would easily dump them. When I introduced her social history as investigated by the detective, my husband's voice trembled.
What the hell? Why are you telling me this now? If you told me when we were divorcing, I wouldn't have gone through this.
At that time, all you said was get out. You didn't even listen to my side of the story, so I did what you told me to do. Besides, a woman who approaches a married man knowing he's married can't be a decent person, can she?
Don't talk like that. It's unfair, Anne. You make it sound like I'm the bad guy. If you had explained properly at that time, things would have been different.
My husband suddenly spoke in a dejected tone, playing the victim. His words angered me, and I lashed out at him. What are you saying after you've cheated on me? It's not that you're like the bad guy. You are the bad guy. Why don't you just live your life however you want? I don't care anymore. To my words, my husband suddenly spoke in a gentle voice.
Anne, it's going to be tough raising 3 daughters on your own, right? I'll take at least one of them. Give me one of the 3. It'll be easier for you. 2 kids are enough, right?
The content of his kind words was so disgusting it made my head spin. What does he think of our daughters? I would never send them to live with such a man. My husband and his parents don't truly want to live with my daughters because they love them. He speaks as if any of them would do, as if they're not even people. I can only see a future where they're crushed by my husband and his parents. As they grow up, I know they'll be treated terribly, just like I was. So I flatly refused. Stop joking around. I will raise my daughters properly.
Don't be like that. Kids need their dad, right?
My husband said, trying to justify himself. A father who barely took part in raising them and cheated doesn't deserve custody. I spoke firmly, not to give him any false hopes. It's up to the daughters whether they want such a dad. They're too young to decide for themselves, so I'll take responsibility and raise them. I said angrily and hung up the phone on my husband. I don't know if it was because I blocked him, but I never heard from him again. Months passed. My husband and Emma apparently got divorced. Emma took her child and went back to her parents' house. Apparently, the child's father was also married, and she's been sued for compensation by his real wife. Financially strained, she's now living with her parents raising her child. Terrifyingly, she seems to have no remorse. She's aware of her wrongdoings and shows sincerity in the form of compensation. But that money is provided by her father, a company president, so she lives a carefree life. It seems it was just a whim for her to go after my husband, who could get anything she wanted. She decided to target married men using her beauty and status to take whatever she wanted. She just happened to see my husband and me in town and decided to destroy our lives on a whim. It's a nice nuisance because my life was ruined just because of a whim. The reason Emma, who usually just took men and left, decided to marry my husband was because he was indecisive and sweet on her. Emma wanted to marry a man who would treat her like a princess, giving in to her every whim and buying her anything she wanted. Not only towards my husband, who was easily charmed by her, but also the mistress herself. I'm speechless with disbelief. My husband was deceived, but he could have refused and stayed faithful. No matter what I hear, the fact that my husband betrayed me doesn't change. I heard that my husband and his family were shunned by friends and relatives and moved far away. They came to my house just once after moving.
Anne, stop being stubborn and give us one of the kids.
That's right, Anne. If you raise them alone, the love will be unbalanced. It's not good. So, the 3 of us will raise them. Please stop. I'll raise them myself. Maybe they thought they could take the youngest. The 3 of them came with awful expressions, trying to take her away, but I resisted desperately.
You can't handle it, Anne. You can't raise her while working. Hand her over. Anne, it's pitiful. We'll take care of her. Don't worry.
No matter what I said, they wouldn't listen. Stop. Don't take her away. That's kidnapping. My third daughter screamed loudly, and I shouted just as loudly. Residents nearby heard our cries and gathered, quickly restraining the three of them. Soon after, the police arrived in response to the call and took the three away. I thanked the neighbors repeatedly and was relieved about my daughter's safety. After that, the three of them received a restraining order, but I'm considering moving because of this. Just having a restraining order isn't enough to feel safe. As long as they know where we are, it's not strange to think they might come again. I feel sorry for my parents living with us, so I discussed moving with them. They agreed, saying it would be a nuisance if we were followed forever, and decided to sell the house and move with us. Still, I feel sorry that my daughter's environment has to change so often. Yet, just seeing their smiling faces and healthy growth is healing. I decided to move to a new place to protect them. Shortly before moving, I received a call from an unknown number. Thinking it was the moving company, I answered, but it was surprisingly Emma. Summarizing her sobbing story, she apparently got involved with too many men and contracted a serious disease. She cried, asking for the money back for her treatment, but I responded coldly. Don't you have a wonderful husband? Or somebody who buys you everything? I don't have anything to do for you. I cut her off without really listening to her response. I blocked her number right there and bought a new cell phone, ensuring I wouldn't receive any more calls from Emma. I planned to keep working hard, repaying my parents for their support, and ensuring my daughters grew up healthy,